Okay, that brings us to our next track. This is Wild Pink. Grant, can you tell us about Sprinter Brain?
Let's rock because it's time to rock. I needed some rock and roll in my life. And the story for why Wild Pink is here is one, I love their album, Dulling the Horns, that came out this year. But also because a friend of mine, Josh, who we've talked about on the podcast a couple times actually, and a contributor to episode Grant and stuff, like Josh loves Wild Pink in the same way that I do. And we talk about it a lot. Their previous albums, many of them, Yoke in the Fur, and then ILYSM, I Love You So Much, was their last one. Very great albums, but then this new one came out and they were dropping tracks. And Josh was like, dude, this new Wild Pink is great. They're not coming to the Twin Cities, but they're coming to Chicago. Do you want to drive there? And I was like, yeah, let's figure that out. I need a show. I would love to see this live. The songwriter is John Ross. He had come through Twin Cities and he opened for the Antlers, but he was solo and it was great, but it was just him solo and it didn't get the full richness that they get out of their albums. And so I was very much, I need to see Wild Pink in full band form, especially with the way this new album sounds. And so it was a 6 hour drive or so to Chicago, and it was Josh and then our buddy Jeff, who is married to Summer's sister Chrissy, and so Jeff and I are kind of brothers, and it was a fun road trip. It was one that took me about 2.5 of the 6 hour drive to get out of work mode and into go see a show at the Empty Bottle in Chicago, which is a venue that I've only ever heard about but never been there. And it was super fun, and it was just a quick out and back. We had a great dinner in Chicago, talking music, talking politics. This is right after the election, talking fatherhood, talking sports. It was what I needed. And it was a real exciting show to go to. Empty Bottle was super intimate, super downstairs, dungeony kind of feel, but the stage was in the corner. And so you had this kind of L shaped, you felt like you were up close no matter where you were standing. And the band, it wasn't a giant stage, but 4 of them up on stage. And the sound, I wear earplugs, but I just felt like the whole sound was shaking the room. This song captured it really well. So I put Sprinter Brain on it because it just punches you in the gut in a good way and just wakes you up. And so I thought from an ordering perspective, Sean, we eased into it, and then Sprinter Brain, just, I loved it. And that moment in the show, there were so many moments like this, but when this song came on, the whole crowd started pogoing too. And I haven't been at a show since high school where I avoid those shows, I think, where there's going to be too much bumping into each other or whatever. This show felt this, everybody's in the vibe and the vibe is shaking the room. And it was just so, I needed that. I needed this out of body experience. I felt like I was floating and pogoing up to the moon kind of thing. Wild Pink kind of brought that out in this really great live show. And this song, the more I paid attention to the lyrics, because the video that we'll put on there is the lyric version of the song, so you see it all up on the screen. But I just love the opening line or the opening stanza where he's talking about picking up a seashell and kind of weighing the truth of it, and then you put it back down and you just let it be. And I thought there was just so much kind of brilliance to observing and letting nature be, but like letting nature be part of you. And I'm sure I'm reading more into it than John maybe intended, or maybe I am, I don't know. But he has this a way of seeing life go past us, but respecting it and respecting it in a way that I liked. John is one of these guys. I don't know if you could imagine playing this song as energetic as it is, but really not having any facial expression to match the energy. I don't mean this as anything derogatory, but it's just you watch somebody on stage play something like this, and he's just doing it. He's just going, and I'm like, man, I would be like bouncing off the walls like a monkey, just unbelievably excited to play music like this with friends, and they're all interacting really on a tight stage, but they just made it go. And the drummer is the way I love to see a drummer, just full bore going. And the double snare that they put where they're just like jamming and it just kicks. It is energy inducing for me. You can hear how excited I am to talk about it. I would say it's a simple song, but it just hit all the right notes for me, and love to share it. And since then, a lot of people, when I think I was telling you guys, hey, I'm going to Chicago to see a band, you'd say, what band? I'd say Wild Pink. And some people, oh, okay, that's a band you must really love if you're going to drive 12 hours to go see them. And that conversation has come up again and again with our friends from Josh and Jeff and I. People be like, who's this band? And every time we've said Wild Pink, they're like, I don't know about Wild Pink. And then they would come back and say, man, what a great band. That totally seemed worth it. And I was like, yep, it was worth it. So thanks, Josh, for pulling me out of my couch on a weekend and going to do an awesome show and see Chicago together. So that was my Wild Pink story for this year.
Sounds like you needed the road trip as much as you needed the show. Good thing they weren't playing in the Twin Cities, or
Yeah,
you'd have missed out on that part of it.
exactly.
Yeah. The song is really powerful. I love the driving eighth notes. It's just like a song just full of driving eighth notes. I think that by itself is pretty appealing. Simple chorus or simple guitar riff in the chorus. I think it has a simplicity to it, which allows space maybe for all the pogoing, as you called it, Grant.
Mhm.
And then the opening stanza, you talked about that. That was really what stood out to me, other than the driving eighth notes, is really the poetry in that opening line. So hopefully folks will get a chance to take a look at these lyrics. It's poetic. I think sometimes you look at song lyrics and you're like, wow, that's really basic. And this is just, it looks like somebody that's trying to rhyme some 4/4 lines to get some lines on paper. This is not that. This is quite the opposite. And I actually had a little bit, I think, of a different interpretation than you, in that it felt like someone who might be wanting their partner or their friend to be a bit more expressive and to tell them more about the experience that they're going through. Yet, what they observe is that they swim down and hold an emotion for a moment, but then they let it go and they don't really share it. And I liked that phrase, the weight of the truth, or weigh the truth of it in your hands, I think is what the lyrics are. And then maybe that feels too heavy to swim back up to the surface with that, the weight of that truth. I thought it was really poetic, and it speaks to, I think, part of the human condition, which is that sometimes you need to and you want to, and your partner demands that you share the emotion, and other times you need to just put it back down again and let it be where it is on the seafloor, which is often like out of sight. I think that's the other part of the metaphor that really spoke to me, is that unless the water is really clear, you can't tell what's on the seafloor. There's stuff down there, and it's up to you to dive down there and embrace that stuff. But sometimes it's a long journey to get down there, and it's a lot of pressure and distortion and lack of visibility, and perhaps a long journey and all these things to go down that far. A lot of metaphor in there and a lot of artistry in the way they pull it together behind this backdrop of we're gonna we're gonna make your heart beat with eighth notes from here until the 12-hour road trip is over.
Melt your face off.
Yeah.
I love this. Are these guys from Chicago?
I think Brooklyn. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's from
Okay.
Brooklyn, yeah.
New York?
Or New York.
Yeah, gotcha. I pulled up their Spotify profile because I was like, where are they from? Because the line that stood out to me was Boston to
Mhm.
Bath. And my first thought was overseas, Bath, UK. But then when I looked it up, I was like, oh no, he's probably talking about Bath, Maine, which is 2 hours away from Boston. And I could imagine somebody who's maybe dating somebody from between Boston and Bath, or maybe they took a trip and the metaphor of seashells came up because they're driving along the East Coast between Boston and Bath. That was interesting to me to think about what the sea is like there. I imagine that it's really rocky and probably not real pleasant to go swim in or walk the shores, but maybe I'm wrong. So I was curious. And then the other thing that stood out to me, which I didn't expect, was the album was mixed by Alex Farrar, who is Asheville musician.
Who knew?
So,
That's cool.
yeah, so just it's fun to pull on these threads a little bit. And I will say I wasn't vibing with the rock at first. This song on the playlist has been the hardest one for me to palate. And I don't know why, because the message is similar to a lot of the other messages around, like, pressure is the formula, pressure is the plan. Basically, like, you're in the darkness, that's natural. You're supposed to feel this way. It's going to feel like pressure. That's interesting to me. I think the thing that kept me coming back to it and is standing out for me now is that piano. I want to play piano like that. When I think about putting my fingers on keys, like, it's that kind of rock and roll. It's a percussion instrument, and I sometimes forget that about piano, that it's intended to be banged on, and I love the way they bang on it in this track. Sprinter Brain is curious to me. I'm curious if he's thinking like Sprinter Van, and what happens to your brain when you're on a trip, say from Boston to Bath. So many curious threads to pull on. I'd love to hear an interview with them talking about this song and the writing of it and what it means to them and what the intent was. But really love that you put it on here. I appreciate the shakeup from the vibey stuff that we've had so far.
Yeah, sometimes the shakeup is welcome. Sometimes the shakeup isn't what you need at the moment. It was definitely something that I needed. Funny you bring up the interview because Josh is a writer, as we've mentioned, and he's reached out to John about doing a article or like a bio interview with him. And when we were at the show, after the show, John went right to the merch table to meet people. And so Josh and John shared a little moment of, hey, I reached out. Would you like to connect? He's like, yeah, let's connect and figure this out. Getting to know and have that accessibility to an artist like this and maybe ask some of the questions about, hey, man, tell us about Sprinter Brain. Where's the inspiration? We want to dig into the lyrics if you're willing to and see where he goes with it. But I enjoyed it. And I think I needed that shake up in my life. So the song was hitting where I needed to. And then in the playlist, as I mentioned in the order, I would get to this point in the playlist and we'll talk about Quiet Houses, but it just hit like a let's dance and shake it for a little bit. So glad you put it there, Sean.
There you go. We'll give you a chance to hear it. This is from Dulling the Horns. This is Sprinter Brain.